One of the things I've loved most about making these Switch 2 performance tests is the feedback. All of it. Whether it's good, bad, or somewhere in between, your comments have genuinely helped shape these videos for the better. I've taken everything on board, from requests to test certain games to reminders about what details matter most. Because of all that, I've now bundled this whole series into a dedicated playlist to make it easier for everyone to catch up on revisiting past entries. And yes, also I promise, I'm not going to say glow-ups anymore. I've heard you loud and clear. But since someone did kindly accuse me of glazing with the Switch 2, you can slap me silly and call me Krispy Kreme, because we're about to glaze over another fresh batch of Switch 1 games to test on the new hardware. Let's get into it. Subnautica. Subnautica was a fantastic and ambitious port on the Switch 1, but it struggled with really long load times, noticeable frame rate drops, and heavy level of detail pop-in. Despite its flaws, it remained a fun and atmospheric survival game the players hoped would shine with more power behind it. On the Switch 2, this version is a massive leap forward. Loading times are now incredibly fast, cutting down the wait to get into the world. Once in game, the frame rate is locked to around 30 frames a second, making exploration feel much smoother than before. Level of detail pop-in and environmental rendering quirks are still present, but that's due to the game's engine rather than the hardware. But they are still less distracting, and there are a few little minor hitches when loading into new biomes, which I noticed weren't even picked up by the FPS monitors, so nothing close to the stuttering or sluggishness of the original release. Handheld also looks crisp and runs just as smooth, making this a great game to revisit on the go. It's a huge improvement, and it makes Subnautica feel like it's much more playable and immersive on the Switch 2. Chuck on your headphones and dive back in. Saints Row 4 Re-elected. Saints Row 4 Re-elected was one of the more technically ambitious open world games brought to the Switch 1. While it was really playable, the experience wasn't without its flaws. You would have occasional blur, variable resolution, and some frame rate dips during chaotic action sequences. Fans were curious to see if the Switch 2 could clean things up and deliver a smoother ride through this over-the-top sandbox. On the Switch 2, the game runs at an uncapped frame rate and feels smooth throughout. The action is slick, traversal is fast, and everything from super-powered leaps and chaotic gunfights plays out without a hitch. The game still has that pixelation, which is more obvious on the Switch 2, but overall the game holds up really well and is fun to play through again. It's a great version of the great game. Not perfect visually, but a smoother frame rate and consistent performance make this easily the best way to play Saints Row 4 on a Nintendo platform. Goat Simulator 3. Goat Simulator 3 was a requested test simply because of how bad it was on the original Switch. When I reviewed it, I was so disappointed by its bug-ridden, messy state. To their credit, Coffee Stain did try to improve things with post-launch patches, but the performance still left a lot to be desired. On the Switch 2, sadly, not much has changed. Level of detail pop-in is still a major problem. Load times remain long, and the experience feels just as unpolished as it did on the Switch 1. I hate writing negative reviews because people worked on this game, but I still stand by my original verdict. This is a game that simply does not feel suited for Nintendo's platforms, and even with the extra horsepower on Switch 2, it's a disappointment. Goat Simulator 3 remains a rough port on the Switch, and it's one to skip, especially if you value performance or polish. Warframe. Warframe has always been an ambitious port on the Switch. It packed a massive online world with fast-paced combat into handheld, and for the most part ran steady at 30 frames per second. However, the performance would dip in large open areas like the plains of Eidolon, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, or during big firefights, as well as crashes and freezes and occasionally disrupted missions. Post-launch updates helped improve stability, but many players hoped the Switch 2's extra power would iron out these lingering issues and deliver a smooth experience that this game deserves. At the moment, Warframe is actually not listed on the Switch 2 backwards compatibility list, and as a result the game carries some quirks. There's noticeably heavier pixelation in docked mode compared to handheld, but on the plus side, the game still runs smoothly overall without any major frame rate dips. Hopefully, once Digital Extremes officially optimizes it for the new system, the resolution and image clarity will improve. For now, only players who have previously owned Warframe on their account can access it for the Switch 2, as it isn't available to download yet. It's a smooth performer on the Switch 2 despite being unofficially supported so far, and worth revisiting once it gets a proper compatibility update. Caravan SandWitch. Caravan SandWitch is a beautiful and relaxing game that struggled to reach and maintain a stable frame rate on the original Switch. While its world of charm won over many players, myself included, performance issues, particularly with stuttering and inconsistent frame pacing, held the experience back from feeling truly smooth. Fans were hoping that the Switch 2's extra power would finally give the game the stable performance it deserved. Now on the Switch 2, it's noticeably improved, although it's not perfect. There's still a few hitches here and there, and the level of detail pop-in is quite noticeable, something that stands out during exploration. I did find there were minor animation issues that crop up early on, basically just when you load in, like the van's not travelling quite smoothly until the world finishes loading, and once everything settles, however, the game runs at an uncapped frame rate that feels much smoother overall. Caravan SandWitch also retains its incredible soundtrack, making the overall experience worth revisiting. It's a much smoother ride on Switch 2, even if some rough edges remain. Definitely worth checking out if you missed it the first time. Resident Evil 8 Village Cloud Edition. Now, this was requested because people thought it could do wonders with the better network connection stability that the Switch 2 offers, so I was asked to test it. Now, I'm not going to measure the frames on this one as it's cloud-based and really has no bearing on the Switch. This is simply a network test. I tested this over a Starlink internet connection on wireless, which usually runs at about 300 to 400 megabits per second here in Australia. Load or connection times were longer than expected. I only managed to get 1.5 minutes of actual gameplay in before being booted back to the menu. I noticed a roughly 1 to 2 second delay between my inputs and the game's response. Unfortunately, it's not only not enjoyable, it's actually unplayable. The gameplay felt unacceptably sluggish and unresponsive. I should say that the average upload on my Starlink is about 25 megabits per second. It's not in a condition I could recommend. The playability of the game completely evaporates with that level of input lag. If you're looking for a smooth horror fix on Switch 2, this isn't it. And I don't even know if cloud support is officially optimized, but I would avoid this like the plague. LEGO Star Wars Skywalker Saga. This massive LEGO adventure covers all 9 mainline Star Wars films in one package, and it was an exciting release for Switch owners. While it's a great time overall, the original Switch version struggled to keep its frame rate steady, especially in 2-player co-op where dips and stutters were common. The lower resolution also made for some finer visual details to look muddy, which was a shame considering how charming the environments and characters are. On Switch 2, the game still runs at that low resolution compared to other platforms, so it doesn't have the sharpest image. However, the biggest improvement is in the performance. The frame rate is noticeably smoother, even in co-op play, and while it's not a night and day transformation, and it sticks around 30 frames a second, the experience feels far more stable and enjoyable this time around. It's a solid improvement that smooths out some of the rough edges of the original release, not the sharpest looking, but far more playable, especially with a friend. Octopath Traveller. Octopath Traveller remains one of the most visually striking and beloved RPGs on the Switch, thanks to Square Enix's signature HD 2D art style. The original release ran fairly well overall, but some players, myself included, would notice occasional frame rate dips during flashy combat sequences or when spell effects filled the screen. Fans were eager to see if the Switch 2 could iron out these minor blemishes and make the experience smoother. On the Switch 2, the game holds up very well. Frame rate dips appear to be completely gone during both exploration and combat, resulting in a smooth and stable experience throughout. Visually though, the game doesn't look very different at all from the original, although the game's subtle haze effect seems to be slightly more noticeable now. It could just be me because it's been a while since I've revisited it, but it could also be because of the crisper screen and resolution handling. This is still a beautiful game that benefits from the Switch 2's steady performance. It's an excellent RPG and a joy to play. While the visuals didn't change at all, the consistent frame rate makes this a great way to play Octopath Traveller on a Nintendo handheld. Juarez Gunslinger. Call of Juarez, Gunslinger was praised as one of the better performing first-person shooters on the original Switch. It delivered a consistent 30 FPS frame rate in both docked and handheld modes, with only minor frame pacing quirks reported. Its smooth performance and stylized visuals made it stand out amongst other shooters on the platform, so naturally, people were curious to see how it would hold up, or possibly improve on the Switch 2. On the Switch 2, the game runs rock solid, and now I haven't actually played the original version before the Switch 2, so I can't really make a side-by-side comparison, but what I can say is from what I've played, the image is sharp, the frame rate is smooth, and the whole experience felt great to play. There's no performance hiccups or visual oddities stood out during my session. It's still a blast to play and is performing wonderfully on the new hardware. If you missed this the first time around like I did, it's worth a look at on the Switch 2, especially when it's just a fistful of dollars. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. As a part of the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, Snake Eater brought one of the most beloved stealth action titles to the Switch. The original release performed fairly well on the Switch 1 with only minor frame rate dips, mostly during complex scenes or intense action sequences, and people were also upset it was locked to 30 frames a second. Given the importance of the atmosphere and visual clarity in a game like this, people were eager to see if the Switch 2 could boost that frame rate and smooth out a couple of those rough spots. On the Switch 2, gameplay itself feels, well, solid. The frame rate remains stable and sneaking through the jungle feels just as smooth as you'd want it to be. However, one surprising issue stood out to me. There's noticeable ghosting effects during the cutscenes. I don't remember it being this bad. Now, initially I did review this thing on launch, but the character outlines seem to leave faint trails, or it's like you can view 3 or 4 frames at any given time. I don't recall it being this pronounced on the original hardware, and it is really distracting during heavy story moments. The image retains a slight blur overall, but at least the performance holds steady during gameplay. It's a bit of a mixed bag, this one, because the gameplay is smooth and enjoyable. It's still locked at 30 FPS, which is a shame, but the visual ghosting in cutscenes is hard to ignore. Still perfectly playable, and hopefully something that gets patched out in the future update. And there you have it. It's another round of Switch 2 test done and dusted. Saints Row turned out to be a pretty big surprise, and Subnautica finally feels like it's the version that it always should have been. As always, if there's a game that you wanted to see tested, let me know in the comments below. Some titles I'll need to wait on until they hit a sale because I do buy them all, so they're definitely on the list and I'm doing what I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out what'sitlike.com.au.